Hello, hello, hello. Welcome back to the Saba show. Today we are doing the round 4 predictions. I picked up COVID. I currently have it, so this one's going to be a bit shorter to ensure that I have to do less work, basically, because I'm a bit degenerated. But without further ado, let's dive right in. Show your support if you do enjoy. But yeah, as I just said, let's go. First game up is the Power and the D's. Power 0-3, D's 3-0. I think this one is a no-brainer, but I think Port Adelaide actually may come out here sensing the pressure and will actually put up a better fight than I think some people will anticipate. Obviously lost that game against the Crows. I mean, they shouldn't have given that one up full stop, let alone against a side that's probably predicted to go bottom 4 this year. But look, I think the D's, I mean, they haven't been at the peak of their powers, but they have done what they've needed to do against basically every opponent they come up against. So I think they will ensure that they pick up the 4 points here. I think they're just too good a football side to pass it up. Next matchup is the Cats and the Lions. The Lions absolutely flogged North the other week without really getting out of first gear. And the Cats basically, well, came out of nowhere to win that game against the Pies. Probably didn't really have a right to, but good football side to do that, and they've got a wealth of experience, so that was always going to put them at an advantage to some extent. They are playing this one at home. The Lions, historically, I mean, well, they lost here last year or the year before, controversially. Look, I think the Cats probably can pick up the win here. I would not be surprised if Brisbane do, but I think the Cats can break the Lions' 3-game win streak, and they will pick up the points here. They've been really tough to gauge, the Cats, because they beat Essendon convincingly. Mind you, Essendon haven't won a game this year. Then they played pretty disappointingly in that third quarter, but then cancelled it out with a good last quarter performance. And then the in-between game was that loss against Sydney, where they had a lot of chances but were pretty much off the mark the whole night. So I think the Cats are going to win this one. I don't know why, given the Lions have been pretty good. I don't know who the best team in the comp is so far this year. There isn't really a clear team standing out, but I think the Cats are going to do it here. The AFL love interesting time slots, and we've got another one here. It is Sydney taking on North. Sydney are 2-1, North are 1-2, but North probably the worst 1-2 side I've ever seen. They lost by 108 last week, as we just mentioned. They barely beat West Coast and lost to Hawthorn. So 3 teams you could argue that they could have picked up the points against. Well, actually, no. You would have expected them to sort of put up a fight, but I think that was, that game looked like an absolute disaster on paper, and it actually panned out in reality. The Swans, they're very lucky they didn't lose by more against the Bulldogs. Only lost by 2 goals, but had 11 less scoring shots, and I think that's a game that really surprised me, because the Swans in the first 2 games had decent competition they were coming up against, and showed resilience in both, showed how they are probably, well, improvers on last year. This game is just a no-brainer, though. Let's be honest. It's at the SCG. North have been arse all year. Probably the worst team in the comp by a country mile, even though they aren't last. And the Swans, I mean, yeah, last week they would have been disappointed with the result, but they could easily put up a similar result to that game between Brisbane and North last week. So that is my prediction. The 4:35 game is between the Pies and the Eagles. The Eagles still are winless. Disappointing loss last week against Fremantle, but I think we saw that one coming as well. They did get some reinforcements back last week, but it didn't really make a hell of a difference. Apparently that game wasn't pretty either. Yet Fremantle won by 9 goals. So there you have it. The Pies, as we mentioned earlier, choked the lead. It was really interesting to see Pendlebury go into the back line for the last quarter, and that really, well, it coincided with them losing the lead. So they never really opted to put Pendlebury back in the middle, and I was waiting for the time they did that. But it never happened. I think they brought Crisp into the middle and took him off half back for Pendlebury, and that's ultimately what was decisive in terms of the final results. So, look, I think Collingwood are going to win this one at Marvel. They've put together some good performances throughout the year. I think apart from the last quarter, they were pretty damn good. That third quarter was exhilarating to watch. But yeah, I mean, obviously they didn't pick up the 4 points, and they would be disappointed with that because they let that one slip. But I don't think it's going to happen here. West Coast last year got flogged by Collingwood at the MCG. This one's at Marvel, but I don't think it's going to make any sort of difference. We have the Saturday night games, and we're going to go with the Fox footy fixture first. It is Fremantle and GWS, and this one is closer than I think people would expect. Fremantle beat West Coast, but I'm not really sure how good they are yet. They have beaten West Coast, they have lost to St Kilda, and they have beaten Adelaide. So they have not played one worthy opponent at the moment. West Coast, they needed to win that, they did. Adelaide, they needed to win that, they did. St Kilda, they probably could have won that, but they didn't. So it's going to be interesting to see when they come up against a team like GWS, who are sort of situated in, that 6th to 10th position. At least that's what people anticipated at the start of the year. They won by 26 last week and basically showed off how good they are when they are good. Mind you, it was against Gold Coast, and they didn't look like they came out to play either. But I actually backed GWS to win this. I don't know why. Fremantle's forward line is still relied on through the small forwards and not the key forwards. They just can't get going, the keys. Very inconsistent, and that just keeps carrying over year after year. GWS got their season off to a start 3 weeks late, but I think that's probably the kick up the arse they needed. And even though they were, they only won by 26, it was at about 50 points, 40 points for the majority of the game. So, once it got out to that lead. So, I think GWS actually going to win this. Tom Green's been excellent. Canelio's been excellent. The forward line was good. And Braden Preuss came back in last week and put together a very good performance. So provided Sean Darcy comes back for Fremantle, I think that's going to be a very, very good matchup between those two. But I think GWS will upset Freo. Could you call it an upset? But I think they'll get up in a narrow win. Other game on Saturday night is a ripper and Richmond. I mean, I thought they were, losing stars wouldn't matter. Obviously beat GWS pretty convincingly, and we saw how GWS played last week. Then they came up against St Kilda and basically capitulated after a very strong first half in what was a really high-scoring match. Max King just took over, and they didn't really have anyone to match him up against. Maybe Noah Bolter would have been the go to send him to the back line. I don't know if that actually ended up transpiring, but it didn't work if it did, if they did send him back. So they would have been very disappointed with the loss because I think they were up by about 4 goals in the third quarter. The Doggies needed to get a win, and I don't think the pundits really backed them in to win that game. They got the job done. 9 goals, 17 is a bit of a worry, though. They won a game on the back of them kicking 17 behinds and not 17 goals. So they need a bit more forward production. Obviously, without Josh Bruce, that is going to be a little bit of an issue, but I think that's where the midfielders need to step up. Cody Waitman was very good last week. In times where they couldn't convert goals, Waitman was kicking straight. So that gave them the buffer they needed every single time the Swans fought back into the contest. I think this is going to be a good game of footy, but I think the Bulldogs in the midfield are going to destroy Richmond. Then again, a couple of weeks ago, I said Richmond were going to get outrun at the MCG by the Giants midfield, and it ended up being the complete inverse. So don't be surprised if Richmond actually surprise a few here and get up, but I think the Bulldogs, surely they've got to win this one against Richmond. I mean, there's an opportunity begging, and they've got to make sure that they capitalise on it. So I think the Dogs will get up. Early Sunday afternoon matchup, and it is the Bombers taking on the Crows. Both teams arguably should have been winless going into this game, but the Crows were saved by Jordan Dawson on the siren. Actually, they were saved by Sam Mays, who was an absolute bozo, punching Lockie Murphy in the gut with 5 seconds left in the defensive 50. But that's beside the point. They needed to kick that goal to win the game, and Dawson executed, even though it didn't look that pretty. The Bombers actually put up a decent fight against the D's. They actually looked like they had a sniff in the last quarter when Peter Wright went on a run there by himself. But that's the problem. It's basically Peter Wright or bust for Essendon in that forward line. They've sent Stringer down there a bit. Andrew Phillips as a second ruck went into the forward 50. I mean, that's not sustainable at all. You're not going to kick a winning score with Andrew Phillips as your second tall. So they basically need Peter Wright to deliver on a regular basis. This is really tough to predict because I think Adelaide actually get Tex Walker back. At the same time, this one's at home for the Bombers. And Peter Wright, I would suspect, could kick a pretty high total, provided, you know, the Crows' backline has a stinker. And they don't have a wealth of experience in that backline in terms of key backs. So I think that the Bombers actually will pick up their first win of the year. I mean, it's got to come at some point. I think the Crows are getting Tex Walker back, as I said, which could pose as a little bit of an issue. The Bombers could have their hands full in that department, but I think Essendon could... It's a very even matchup, and I wouldn't be surprised if you picked Adelaide to win this game, but I think the Bombers surely are going to break the drought now. 3:20 matchup is Hawthorn St Kilda. I'm going to back Hawthorn to win this one. Probably very stiff to lose against us last week, the Baggers. First loss of the season, losing by 1 point. I mean, you don't complain with those. They could have been 3-0 easily, but 2-1 all the same. St Kilda had a very good game last week. Started a bit slow. Well, actually, no, they didn't. Oh, yeah, they did start slow out of the blocks. High scoring first half. Thought that they were mudded. And then Maxi King came to the rescue, basically. And the Tigers' backline had no answers. I think Hawthorn proved to me that they have a backline that can hold up well. The thing is, I feel like Max King could also take over the game against Hawthorn because I don't see as just like a good matchup. In saying that, I think it's going to be entirely dependent on how the Saints deliver the ball into the forward line. We saw when Carlton kicked the ball on the heads of Harry Mackay and Charlie Curnow last week, Hawthorn were, you know, they were all over it. And these were shallow entries, so their rebound was relentless. If St Kilda kick it deep to Max King, there's going to be problems. But if Hawthorn find the loophole and see what St Kilda are doing, you know, it's flawed, I think they'll capitalise on it. I'm going to back Hawthorn to win here and bounce back from what was a pretty gut-wrenching loss if you think about it. And the last game of the round is Carlton Gold Coast. Blues have a chance to go 4-0 and the Suns have a chance to bounce back. This one is at Metricon. The Suns, I mean, I don't know what they're doing. Last week they were made to look pretty silly against GWS. I mean, there was no pressure on the midfield. They were basically running rings. The Suns, their forward line also confuses me. They got Levi, but that's about it. And the small forwards don't have a huge impact. I mean, Sexton, Holman, Ainsworth, those guys have got to do things. And last week they weren't pretty much non-existent. The Blues, I mean, last year we are losing that game. We are falling flat and we are 2-1. And, I mean, if you look at the Bulldogs game, we probably could have been 1-2 if it was this time last year. But here we are 3-0. I think we're going to get the win here. You know, as I said, the resilience is wonderful. I think the Suns, as much as Touk Miller could run rings around us and make us look silly like we did in the second half against the Hawthorn midfield, I think the Blues are just going to be too strong here. We've got too many weapons out on the field. I mean, if one guy doesn't fire, then you've got like 3 others who can do a similar, if not the same job. So I think Harry could be in for a big performance here. I think Paddy Cripps could kick another couple. And I think Wiedering will have Levi Casbolt on clamps. This video might as well have been the same length as if I didn't have COVID. But that's going to be it. Drop a like on the video if you did enjoy it. And subscribe to the show. This is a weekly thing. Be there for that. Hope you enjoyed this one, as I said. And have a great rest of your day. Peace out.